Hey there, folks. Since book tour and conventions have been put on hold for a bit, I figured I'd bring book tour to you. So welcome to Russ's Rockin Rollercoaster, intriguing interviews with creative minds. I updated recently. I got a new HD webcam and this new fancy microphone because I'm fancy like that, please. So with us tonight is my friend, namer of new bands and New York Times bestselling author, Dayton Ward. Hello, Dayton.
Hey, Russ. How's it going?
I'm doing well. So tell folks, what part of the country are you in tonight?
I am coming to you live from Lee Summit, Missouri, which is a city that's southeast of Kansas City proper.
Right on, right on. Someone's wishing, I didn't realize someone's wishing you a happy birthday. I didn't realize it was, so.
Oh, thank you.
So to you.
It was a little bit ago, but I'll take it.
Fair enough. All right, better late than never, as they say. All right, folks, just a little heads up. So feel free to send me notes or questions that you have for Dayton in the chat box during the show, and we'll get to a couple at the end. We'll do a Q&A towards the back end. So let's start jumping in. So Dayton, let's tell us all. So where were you born and where'd you grow up?
I was born in Tampa, Florida. And even though we bounced around a little bit for the first few years of my life because my dad was a Marine. So I went from Tampa to North Carolina to Honolulu, Hawaii to Long Island, New York in this pace of about 4 years, and then moved back to Tampa where I basically stayed there until I graduated high school and joined the service myself.
Wait, so where on Long Island did you live for however long you were there?
East Meadow.
East Meadow.
I was there for about 2.5 years.
So I grew up in Merrick, which is just next town over.
Mm-hmm.
So when were you there?
Oh, it would have been like 71 to 74. So
okay, so it just missed you. So
all right, in there because I was kindergarten, first and second grade, and then we got moved. Yeah, then we got moved. So.
We got moved. Fair enough. So, what was that like being sort of an army brat, I guess, as they call it, moving around?
It was. I mean, I was probably young enough. It didn't really have much of an impact on me. It wasn't until you get to our elementary school that you really start making your childhood friendships, So by the time I got back to Florida, I was still in the second grade, and that's probably where I started making my long-term friends.
Right. Okay. So by the time you were
from that I carried through to school. So
right. Gotcha.
Yeah, I didn't have to deal with that.
So you were in Florida. You went to you lived there, went to high school. So going into the Army, was that always the plan for you, or is it just seemed like the right thing? What was the impetus there?
Well, I was never a plan to join the Army because I was a Marine. So different things.
Sorry, Marine.
So,
my bad.
Yeah, no, I know. It wasn't something that it was preordained or anything. I just I decided I wanted to do it. First of all, I was an average student, so I wasn't getting scholarship offers. And my parents really couldn't afford to send me to college. So my intention was to join the military, do my first enlistment, get my college money, and start there. Circumstances saw to it that I ended up staying in.
So when you were, where were you stationed? Were you stateside the whole time? Were you overseas at all? Where'd you go?
Bearing in mind that I served mostly during peacetime, except for the Gulf War, I was stationed at Camp Pendleton in California, and then I was in Okinawa, Japan for a year. And then I was in a little place called Albany, Georgia, where we have a supply and logistics base, and then here in Kansas City for the last tour. And then I went temporary duty everywhere, so depending on where they needed you.
So you're also a software engineer. Was that something, did you learn that before, during, or after you were in the Marines?
I actually learned that while I was in. I went into the IT field, and then I learned programming and software development as my normal job. And then once I got out, I just transferred to the private sector.
So it didn't just, we're getting a little, you're freezing a little bit. So I don't know if your Wi-Fi is okay. Just checking you there. So when you were engineering, was that something that before you were in the Marines, is that something that you had thought, I kind of dig computers, I like this, but you just kind of never got to it? Or was that something that being in the Marines, I said, hey, there's an opportunity, I'll give it a shot? Like, how did that happen?
No, I went in with the expectation of learning IT. I
Oh, you
went in
did?
on an IT program. So I was doing it in high school. I mean, we're talking, early to mid 80s. So that's when computers were starting to become interesting to normal people instead of just
Right.
being in these mystery boxes in a room somewhere. So I went in the core expecting to learn about software and computer development, and then take that and then pursue a major in college once I got out.
And how long all in? How long were you in the Marines?
11 years
11 years. Wow. So at that,
total.
so when you finally left, was it just, I've had enough, or was it just, you wanted to kind of go back and go into civilian life, or was it injury, or just the time?
Yes. All of the above.
Yes.
Um, I was, I had gotten married about halfway through. My wife had put up with 2 moves and relocations, within as many years. So she was getting tired of it. I was here in Kansas City. The job market for people in my line of work was tremendous, and I was a little tired of it. And not getting any younger and dealing with stuff like bad knees and that kind of thing, I decided it was time to hang it up and go get a grown-up job.
So if you were in the Marines, so how did you meet your wife?
We are high school sweethearts.
Are you really?
Yeah,
Wow. Oh, you don't hear that story that much anymore. That's cool.
I know. I'm old-fashioned that way.
Oh, you sure are. Okay, right on. Wow. And she stuck with it, huh? Good for her. So let me ask you.
I know, right? That's amazing. She did. She stuck through everything.
So did she get combat pay too, or?
Yeah, I gave her a little bit of mine. I just siphoned it off, and you know.
So look, so you got a couple kids, you got a wife, and you're a sci-fi guy. Did that happen? Was that something that you did as a kid? Were you a sci-fi, nerd back in the day? Did you come to it later? Like, what was your introduction to, outer space and that kind of thing?
Oh,
Because you're a big
yeah,
NASA guy too.
well, I mean, I was, when I was a kid, the Apollo program was wrapping up, and the space shuttle had not yet done its thing. And so I was a huge fan of the Apollo program, but I was also a science fiction guy. So the original Star Trek, reruns of stuff like Lost in Space and all those 1950s and 60s sci-fi movies that they'd run on a Saturday morning. Then Star Wars hit when I was 11 or 10. So of course that blew everybody's brain in 1977. So yeah, I've been a science fiction fan my whole life.
Now, was that something that you fell into it because, like so many kids, you did? Is that something that your parents did you watch Star Trek or Star Wars? Did you Dad? Did your parents take you, or was that something you kind of did off on your own?
Yeah, my parents never liked science fiction either. They didn't understand it. They didn't see what I saw in it. They still, to this day, can't figure out how I get paid to do this stuff.
Is that right?
No, they had no interest in it, but they didn't have any problem with me doing it. I was just, some of my friends we were all having similar interests. But it was weird. We did the normal things that kids do. We played ball,
Right.
we did all the stuff outside, but I was also a science fiction guy. So I read science fiction novels, and I watched the movies and TV shows that were available at that time, and just kept it going, and it never really faded.
So is it just you? Do you have brothers, sisters? What was that like?
I have one sister. She's 3 years younger than me. She still lives down in Tampa with her family.
So did she watch, did she follow Big Brother and want to watch Star Trek and Star Wars too? Or is that just not her thing at all?
Not her thing at all. Not her thing at all.
So so sci-fi wise, you were the lone wolf in your family.
Exactly. Had to fight for TV time. I had a black and white TV in my room because I couldn't watch it on the big TV in the living room. Dad was watching football.
Right. So back then, what was your, so obviously you watched the original Star Trek, as did I. What were your go-to sci-fi shows? What were your books? What were the things what was your jam back then?
Well, back in the day, we're talking mid 70s. So this is, the original Star Trek was in reruns pretty much every day of the week. And then you had shows like the $6 Million Man. You had the Planet of the Apes movies.
Yes. Dr. Sayers.
Buck Rogers and Battlestar Galactica came after Star Wars hit big.
Yes.
I even got a little bit of Doctor Who going on early in the late 70s. So
Okay.
as far as books, I read the normal guys, Arthur Clarke and Robert Heinlein and Isaac Asimov. In fact, I had a neighbor who introduced me to Heinlein with Starship Troopers. He's like, you like Star Trek, you might like this.
Huh.
And so that was, thank God for him, because that introduced me to that type of science fiction.
So that really opened up your world back then. Was
Yeah.
that your so was Heinlein, was he your gateway drug into
He was one of them.
Yeah.
He was one of them. Him and R.C. Clarke. Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. So let's talk about so you grew up as a sci-fi kid, but you spent the first chunk of your life as a military son, and then in the military yourself. How did you merge all that into becoming, just when did you start writing? When did that transition start to happen? Or did you always write?
No, I didn't write when I was a kid. I started writing as a creative outlet mid to late 20s. It was sort of a counter to my software life. It was just a recreational hobby. And then I never really set out to get published. I was just doing it for fun. And then the Strange New Worlds contest from Pocketbooks for Star Trek came along, and I entered a story in that first contest, and they bought it.
What
and
year
then they bought a couple, 97. And then I did it again the next 2 years. I put a story in for each of the subsequent 2 years. And then after that, I was offered a novel contract to write a Star Trek book. And that was in 99, 2000. And I've been doing it ever since.
So when you first started writing, is it just something that you did on your own? Did you take writing classes? Did you have mentors? How did that come about?
I started doing it on my own. Once I started selling, then I started taking writing courses and paying attention to what other writers were saying. But I didn't set out to do it. I didn't, pursue a degree in it, or I didn't ever think I'd be published. And I certainly didn't think I'd be sitting here doing this tonight as an outgrowth of that. It just something happened.
So, you're best known on the writing side, anyway, for your Star Trek novels. So you watched Star Trek as a kid, like a lot of us did, like I did. But at the time when you were watching it, was there ever an inkling in your mind of, what, someday I'd love to write a Star Trek story or a Star Trek book or a Star Trek movie? Or was it just you watched it as a kid and then, 20 years later, it kind of popped out that way?
I think I tried to write a Star Trek comic or something when I was a kid. I also had aspirations of being a comic artist or a cartoonist when I was a kid. So
Really? Okay.
I think I'm sure I tried my hand at a Star Trek comic, but I discovered that I suck at drawing. Not that I suck at drawing, I just can't do it at the speed and with the talent level that is required for a professionally published comic book. So I kind of shelved that idea. I may have tried stabbing around with some Star Trek stories. I mean, I wrote fan fiction and that kind of stuff, but never with any real aspirations that I would be published, and I never thought about writing a TV episode or a movie. That was beyond, real writers did that kind of stuff. That wasn't going to be me.
So what was it about, there's a lot about Star Trek that was appealing. I remember as a kid watching, it was a little ritual in my house. Sunday nights, me, and my parents, we would eat Chinese food and watch Star Trek on Sunday nights, WPIX. It was a kind of a combination of, it was the outer space, the adventure of it. But even at the time, I was too young to really understand the kind of the social and political, undertones and overtones. Were you aware of it back then? Did it resonate for you, or was it just the adventure of it? What sort of, why is it so deep rooted in you that Star Trek as opposed to maybe something else?
Well, as a young kid, single digits, that kind of thing. It was about the adventure. It was Kirk fighting the Gorn. It was Kirk fighting the Klingons. It was the ships. It was the new planets, the new aliens, and all that. And then as I kept watching the show for the 1,000th time or whatever that rerun is, you start to see, I started to understand there was more to this story or that story than met the eye. There are layers to a lot of those episodes, and there are messages baked into those episodes that I didn't perceive when I was 10 or 11, but I started to figure it out, later on. And even today, every once in a while, I'll catch an episode and I'll think about it in a different way, about the message that they were trying to convey in that script. I don't know. I think it's just different. Star Trek is different than pretty much every other type of other science fiction property you could name. It's overlying optimism. That's the thing that drives it all. Even in its darkest moments, with the darkest stories, there's still a layer of optimism in there that I don't think you see in other franchises.
So when you started, I mean, I agree. That was one of the things that appealed to me, was sort of, at the end, it was a Western in space, ultimately, the good guys were going to win, and it was thrilling, and, with the dun, 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 the cheesy music, and, Kirk doing his thing, and being the renegade. But you got into the books when you got that first contract. What was that first book for you? What was the one that kind of the first Dayton Ward Star Trek novel?
It was an original series novel called In the Name of Honor, and it came out in 2002. So we are seriously dating me at this point. In fact, it was the very last original series novel that had
I like
a little number.
But I'm not ready to date you, though.
Yeah, it had the last number up in the corner for original series novels. You know how they would used to number them?
Yep.
And so I killed the numbering with 97. But it was, I had never written anything that long, ever. My longest short story was maybe 10,000 words. So, of course, when they asked me if I wanted to write a novel, I said, well, absolutely. That sounds like a great idea. What could possibly go wrong?
Yeah, right.
And here we are.
So you wrote that first one, and how many Star Trek novels have you written since then?
25, 26, something like that. I honestly don't keep accurate count. And plus I've written other stuff too. So but yeah, 25, 26 Star Trek novels, something like that.
What do you like about, because you're playing in someone else's sandbox ultimately, but what is it about, since you've written so many, and besides the fact that they pay you, what do you like writing about because anything at a certain point has the potential of getting old, getting a little stale, but to do so many, you've got to keep that energy, that enthusiasm. What keeps you coming back to the world of Star Trek? Why do you like diving into that world again and again?
Well, in my own case, I've managed to write a variety of different types of stories featuring the different sets of characters. And so they're not all original series, they're not all next gen. I've been able to do spin-off books where we create our own sets of characters and situations that aren't based on one of the shows, or I get to write a sequel to a story I wrote earlier, or I get to partner with Kevin, my writing partner, Kevin Dillmore, and we get to do something different. I don't get tired of it. I'm seriously a big fan of Star Trek. I like putting words in those characters' mouths. I never get tired of it. The challenge is always trying to find something different so that the reader is, the reader is getting their money's worth. But I don't get tired of it. I cannot imagine not writing a Star Trek story if asked. I can never imagine saying no.
Well, good for you. Well, hopefully they'll keep asking.
Me too.
I know it's hard to sort of, pick your favorites. Is there, of the different characters, do you prefer the original series over next gen, or some of the newer stuff, or is it just, each one has its own flavor and you can kind of go back and forth?
My favorite's the original. That's the one I grew up with. That's the one I know backwards and forwards, and it feels like it's just a part of me. It's in my DNA. So I love working with those characters. But that said, I love writing for Picard, for example. I love writing dialogue for Picard, or putting you in that character's point of view. It's a challenge because he's such a different type of character and a captain than Kirk was. So he's much more erudite. He's much more educated. He's much more, well-rounded in terms of his interests and things that drive him. It's a lot of fun. So like I said, I don't get tired of it. Every time they ask me, I think it's a new challenge.
So speaking of challenges, right before lockdown, you delivered this hilarious Star Trek book, and then the world went a little bit cuckoo. So what's the book about, and how in the Gorn did you come up with the idea of Kirk Fu?
Well, like many of the things that crossed my brain, it was half joke, half serious. I was working for the publisher at the time on another book, a travel guide devoted to the planet Vulcan, which is its own flavor of insanity. And I was wrapping up that book, and I pitched my editor on this notion of a how-to manual on how to fight like Captain Kirk. And I wanted to mimic, like the hand-to-hand combat manuals you find in the military. And I got about halfway through my spiel on the phone, and he said, "Yes, absolutely, I'm in. Write that up, write that outline. I want to see that." So I wrote an outline, and I described the different Kirk Fu moves that I wanted to incorporate in the book, and how I would break them down and how I would describe it. And my pitch was, my text and all of the stuff that I would write would play it completely straight. As far as the joke is concerned, I'd be the straight man, and it'd be the illustrator, the artist who came in to illustrate these moves. That's where the joke and the humor would come in.
Right.
Because they're so outrageous. Some of those moves that Kirk pulled in the show are just so ridiculous. But if I played it completely straight and pretended like this was serious business, I think it would be a funny joke. He seemed to think the idea worked, and so far, it seems to have been received that way, or at least in the spirit that's its intended. I'm not poking fun at Star Trek. I'm having fun with the inherent humor you find in Star Trek.
Sure. So just for the folks at home and who will see it later, what is the official title of this book?
The official title is Star Trek Kirk Fu Manual, an introduction to Starfleet's deadliest martial art, or something,
So you come up with this. So of all the different moves, what was your favorite Kirk fighting style? What was a favorite Kirk move?
I think the one that comes to me as being the most ridiculous and funniest is the one where he throws himself off the wall. He jumps on the wall and then kicks off the wall to throw himself into his opponent. That is just so, I guess it's parkour or whatever before there was parkour, but
yes.
I mean, it's parkour on a TV budget, or it's 1960s TV budget, but it's just so outrageous and so ridiculous. But that's probably my favorite, just because of how outlandish it is.
So it's the Kirk Fu-iest of all the Kirk Fu?
I think so. I call it the Jimmy Wallbanger, and I think it is absolutely the most Kirk Fu of all Kirk Fu moves.
So is it all just Kirk, or is it also Spock with a Vulcan grip, or is it all Kirk?
It's all Kirk up until the very end, and then there's like a little add-on chapter where you learn Spock Fu, which is basically the Vulcan nerd.
Does anyone else get a move, or that was it? It's all Kirk, and then a little Spock at the end.
It's all Kirk. It's all Kirk. It's all in his honor.
So, do any of his adversaries pop up in Kirk Fu?
Oh yeah, absolutely. In the illustrations, you see Khan, you see the Nazis, you see the guy from the OK Corral, Inspector the Gun. The Gorn is in there, of course. You got to have the Gorn, and then
gotta have the Gorn.
Yeah, they're all in there. Everybody gets a turn in there somewhere.
All right, right on. All right, so Dayton, so that was great, but now it's time for a special segment where we are going to spin the wheel.
Spin the wheel. All right.
On the wheel are 7 categories. We're going to spin the wheel. What you get in the categories are 2 lies and a truth, stranger danger, would you rather, spend that money, iconic roles, fear of flying, and space meal. All right, you ready?
Okay.
There we go. And what did you get? You got space meal. So
space meal.
So it's your last day on the Enterprise. The aliens have come for you, whisking you away to the outer reaches of the universe. You get to have one last meal. What is that meal? Where are you? And who, if anyone, do you share that meal with?
All right. I actually posed this question to my children in anticipation of this question coming up. And their answer was, we got to go to Dave & Buster's one last time before you kick off. So we will go to Dave & Buster's, and so it'll be me and my kids and my wife. We'll go eat chicken wings, we'll eat pizza, we'll eat everything that's bad for us. And then we'll play laser tag and video games before the aliens take me.
All right, fair enough. Sounds good. All right, so you and I are both in the writing business, so let's go to our advice column.
Okay.
What's the best and worst writing advice someone ever gave you, or advice you heard someone else give?
I think the best advice I've ever heard is basically, it boils down to get off your butt and write, is that writer's block is a crock. Deadlines don't care about your muse, and neither does my mortgage. So, writing is work. And if you want to be a writer, then you have to sit down and you have to do it all the time. You're basically a student from the point you decide you're going to be a writer. From then on out, it's like having homework every night for the rest of your life. You need to be a writer. You need to write. You need to read all the time. There's always something new to learn, or at least, learn how to do better than what you know do now. It's just basically, you got to write and read.
And the worst?
Write what you know is the worst piece of advice I've ever heard, at least when it's given as a pat answer, like just oh, hey, write what you know. It's like, I've never been in combat, but sometimes I get paid to write a combat story. And so how is it I'm supposed to be able to understand someone else's perspective, whether it's, someone who doesn't share my gender, or someone who doesn't share my skin color, or hasn't had the same career opportunities I've had, or educational opportunities? How do I write how do I understand what a firefighter thinks, or a nurse, or a teacher, or even a homeless person? That's what research is for. That's what talking to and learning from other people is for. That's what your imagination is for. So you do the work. You read, you travel, you talk to people from different walks of life. You undertake new experiences, and you learn new things, and you know more then, and you apply that to your writing. So that's what I hear when I think, or that's what I think when I hear write what you know. So I took the worst advice and turned it into something that was useful.
There you go. Fair enough. And I agree. So we're getting close to the end. So anyone who's watching, if you've got questions for Dayton, feel free to send them in. I've got one for you. You had mentioned early on some fanfic. Dayton, you've been holding out on us. Where can folks actually get that fan fiction?
Nowhere. All the copies have been burned. All the bodies have been buried. There are no witnesses. There is no proof.
Okay, fair enough. All right. So let's see. We got any other questions coming in? If anyone else, anything they want to ask Dayton, you can send it to me now. Otherwise, we are going to call it a day. Okay. So Dayton, we talked about Kirk Fu. Where can folks get it? And do you have any more plans, any more Kirk Fu plans?
You can get Kirk Fu at any bookstore, online or brick and mortar. If they don't have it in stock, they'll order it for you. Or you can get it right from Inside Edition's website, insideeditions.com, or simonandschuster.com, because they're actually a distributor for the book. As far as whether there might be other books in that vein, I've learned to never say never in this business. So even though there's not anything on the docket right now, that could change as soon as we hang up and I check my email. So I'm not going to say no at this point.
All right, fair enough. All right, thanks, Dayton, for a great show, and thanks to everyone who's watching. I'm your host, Russ Colchamiro. And if you want to keep up with me and future shows, you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at AuthorDudeRuss, and like my Facebook author page. And if sci-fi mystery is your game, my latest novel, Crackle and Fire, featuring my hard-boiled intergalactic private eye, Angela Hardwick, is now available for pre-sale on Amazon as an ebook, with both the ebook and paperback available in September and published by Crazy 8 Press. Thanks, and I'll see all you guys next week. Take care.
Bye.